In the past week on this programme, we have had him described as a gangster, as a madman as well, criminally insane.
Hubris syndrome.
But now we're going to find out from a man who knows Putin very well. Putin knows him very well, but they've never met. What are Putin's incentives? What is he really trying to achieve? Human rights activist and author of the book Red Notice, How I Became Putin's #1 Enemy, Bill Browder, joins us now. That's some claim, Bill, his #1 enemy.
Well, I think he's probably got quite a few #1 enemies at this point. But back when I wrote that book, I was the one he was targeting more than anybody.
Why was he targeting you?
Well, it's a long story, but basically, Putin's regime killed my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, who uncovered a massive government corruption scheme. And I wasn't ready to let it go. And so I went to Washington and I got a law passed called the Magnitsky Act, which imposes visa sanctions and asset freezes on Putin and his regime for human rights abuse and corruption.
You were the first person that was able to get the Americans to impose sanctions on Russia for 35 years.
Yeah.
I mean, don't skip over that. That was
Right.
a huge achievement.
Well, and in fact, that's why he's so angry, because, and actually that moment in time connects to where we are today, which is that Vladimir Putin is not like any other head of state. He is the richest man in the world, and he stole an enormous amount of money from the Russian people. He keeps that money in the name of oligarchs offshore.
Does he enjoy that money? What can he actually do with it?
He's got $1 billion house here, $100 million yacht there. He's got all sorts of stuff scattered all over the world. And he understood from that moment that I got that law passed that all of his money could be frozen at any time. And he got so angry with me for that he chased me around the world with death threats, with kidnapping threats, with 8 Interpol red notices, because he was just... I had found his Achilles heel. He commits terrible crimes in Russia for money, and then he keeps that money abroad, and that's his weak point.
Because how seriously do you take the idea of a death threat on you?
You can see. Alexander Litvinenko, Sergei Skripal, and those are just the household names in London. I could. Boris Nemtsov.
So you're frightened? You're careful?
Well, I'm careful, but I'm not frightened. If you fear is what he wants you to feel. Mm-hmm. If you express fear, if you feel fear, you regulate your own behavior. You don't do what you're supposed to do, and then he's achieved his objective.
So, look, you've won accolades around the world for the 34 countries that have taken on the sanctions that you brought through the Magnitsky Act. Could you have imagined the sort of sanctions that the world have taken in the last week, stuff that you've been campaigning for? We heard President Biden last night in that State of the Union address saying that Russia is more isolated than ever before. This is significant. This is huge.
It's dramatic. I've spent 10 years banging on closed doors. It's been unbelievable, particularly in Europe and here as well. It wasn't until the Salisbury poisoning of Sergei Skripal that the government finally relented and allowed the UK to have a Magnitsky Act. And the European Union was just unbelievable. It was like I was walking into a room, they just wouldn't, they just wanted me out.
Yeah.
They wanted me out. The Germans, the French, they didn't want to hear it. It was just so upsetting to them to talk about doing anything to hold Russia to account. And now here we are in the last 48 hours. The European Union is blocking Russian aircraft. They're sanctioning Russian oligarchs. They're freezing the accounts of the central bank. It's unbelievable, and it's timely because Vladimir Putin, what he's doing, deserves this and a lot more.
But look at Donald Trump shaking his hand there, wanting to be his buddy, wanting to be best mate, reportedly over the weekend calling him a genius and whatever. They know, Trump knows, all these world leaders that gather at the big G7 conferences and whatever, they know he's a murderer. They know he's a gangster. He's like mafia, isn't he?
There's no question. And he is a mafia boss with all the powers of a sovereign state. And there's absolutely no question. And I've seen it with evidence. The guy is involved in major financial crimes. He is involved in major murders. He's involved in covering up murders. He's involved in chemical weapons attacks. The guy is a mafia may be an understatement. He's a terrorist. Yeah. He is a terrorist. He's no better than Osama bin Laden.
Now, look, you spent a lot of time in Russia. As you say, you were the biggest Western investor in that country. You've got a huge knowledge of the country and also now, through your humanitarian work, great expertise of how best to hurt the Russian state. The Americans and now the British Parliament are calling on your services at the moment on how to target many of these assets that have been hidden very cleverly by Russian oligarchs. And there are some suggestions that you may have been giving advice on how best to try and get people to come forward. What are you advising the government at the moment?
They're starting to call me the oligarch hunter. The situation is this, that the oligarchs knew that this moment would come. And so it's not as if, I mean, some of them are very blatant in their ownership of assets, and others most of them have employed lawyers and accountants and specialists to hide things behind shell companies, behind this, behind that, et cetera. And so my proposal to all the governments at this point is to amend the law to say that anybody who has played a role in helping them hide their assets, and that be that a lawyer, an accountant, a banker, now has a legal duty to come forward and provide information on how the structures work, where the assets are, et cetera.
Interesting. That's a game changer.
And would that involve the law to change here in the UK?
It would require. So right now, you need to strengthen the law in the UK to make that happen. And if that were to happen, it would totally change the whole climate, because all of a sudden everybody becomes an informer on these Russian oligarchs.
What support have you got for that bill?
I think everybody says, why don't we have this? I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? I mean, it's right out there. And I mean, it's, if we're trying to go after the oligarchs, we need to know where their assets are. And to know where their assets are, the best people to tell us where those assets are.
There's another way of going after Putin, which would be more direct and would probably involve a bullet to the head or whatever. Does he live in fear? You were talking about you living under the threat of losing your life. Does he do the same?
Well, he's a scared little man, and you can just, I mean, for such a quote tough guy, for him sitting at this long table, 30 feet away. I mean, that's just the worst image he could generate to the world. He's scared of his own people. I just read a story, I don't know if it's true or not, that he lives in a bunker now in Siberia with his family because he's so scared. He's looking around for treachery wherever he can find it, because everybody in Russia would he's bringing the country into ruin. He's making Russia into North Korea.
Well, I mean, he was so popular with Russians, wasn't he? For bringing stability after the Yeltsin years. That was his big trump card, right?
Yeah.
And in 1 week, he's destroyed the ruble. He's blocked people getting cash out of ATMs through all of our sanctions. I mean, the Russians must be beginning to wake up to who they've got running their country.
Well, you're exactly right. So when he came to power, in a moment of where there was like hyperinflation and food lines and just horrible stuff going on. And his big pitch was, with me, everything's going to be okay. Maybe you're not going to have the same freedoms, but materially you're going to be better off and everything's going to be calm. And without me, it's going to go back to that chaos. And here we are, 22 years later, and he has single-handedly, unilaterally created the chaos for every Russian citizen, and it's just remarkable.
So if the coup comes, it will come from within?
Well, I don't think that we have any ability to regime change, and we've already tried that in a lot of places and it doesn't work. It's the Russians' job to get rid of him, and of course he's going to put up every possible barrier to prevent that. But it's the reason why he's in Ukraine is not because of Ukraine, not because of NATO. It's because he's afraid of being overthrown. He's a dictator who saw the writing on the wall. He saw in Belarus, 18 months ago, there was a attempted revolution. It didn't happen because of his intervention. In Kazakhstan, there was a successful revolution. They got rid of Nazarbayev, who was a dictator who had been there longer than Putin. And Putin said, if he doesn't do anything, he's going to be in the same boat as all these other guys. He better do something. So what does a dictator do who's been in power for 22 years when he knows the writing's on the wall? He starts a war. Comes straight out of the dictator's playbook. He starts a war because nobody replaces a leader in the middle of a war. Some people rally around the leader, and that's his play. He's living on borrowed time. At some point, the Russian people, and we don't know what will happen, how it will happen, but at some point they're going to say, wait a second, this is just not right.
Unless, and the picture of the man that you are painting sounds like a man to me that would press the button.
Well, that's the terrifying thing, is that he would press the button to save his own skin.
So if he's going down, we all go down with him.
Right. That's the problem. And I should also point out, and this is the thing that really is the most upsetting part of this whole story, is that Ukraine is just an intermediate step. As I said, he doesn't care about Ukraine specifically. It's just a tactical move. If he were to have gotten Ukraine in his plans, 2 days blitzkrieg, everyone surrenders, then the next stop would be Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania. Mm-hmm. And he would really like to challenge us, UK, US, to see whether we're ready to go to war with Russia to enforce Article 5 of NATO for a country, at least in America, that maybe 2% of the people could even identify on a map.
Yeah.
So the way to stop his war machine is to stop buying his gas, is to go after his oligarchs, to make his oligarchs so unhappy with him that he has to change his playbook, right? We're already seeing, though, people like Abramovich here in London, the owner of Chelsea. We were hearing reports that he's trying to sell Chelsea quickly. Will the law in this country, in the moves that we're talking about, move quickly enough to be able to tackle and target the oligarchs so that that war machine can be stopped before those things happen that you describe?
No, the law here is slow and burdensome. The oligarchs are swift and nimble. They're working with their lawyers, 24/7 right now to come up with plans and schemes to hide their assets. But in a certain way, that's not the most important thing. If I look at this thing broadly, how do we stop Putin? The first thing we do is we supply the Ukrainians with everything they need. So the Ukrainians are really the heroes in this story. The Ukrainians are the buffer zone between Putin and us. And so if we don't want to have a direct war with Vladimir Putin, we should do everything we can in every way possible to assist the Ukrainians.
And are we, do you think, doing enough?
Well, I mean, I have a lot of criticisms of the British government, but in terms of supporting the Ukrainians, we've been there probably number one in the whole world in terms of supplying anti-tank missiles, in terms of training them, in terms of doing this well in advance of everybody else. And so we are doing that. But there is one thing, and this is very controversial, but I'm going to say it. This is the elephant in the room. In 1994, we asked the Ukrainians to give up their nuclear weapons. And we said, if you give up your nuclear weapons, we will protect your territorial integrity. It's called the Budapest Memorandum. Mm-hmm. The United Kingdom, the United States signed that, along with Russia, with Ukraine. And here we are. Their territorial integrity is being threatened. And so, they're begging us for a no-fly zone. And I understand the scary idea of shooting down a Russian plane. But, I mean, if we don't, they're going to be firing on Estonia pretty soon, and then we're going to be in a direct war with Russia.
Yeah.
Bill, how does this all play out? Where does it go? I mean, he's finished on the world stage, whatever happens, win, lose, or draw. I mean, he can't go and meet world leaders and people shake his hand now from here on in and give him the respect that he may crave. Where does it end? How does it end?
It could end a lot of different ways. Let me tell you how it ends in his mind. It ends in his mind that he goes to the border of Poland or the border of Estonia. He says, "Are you ready to go to war with me?" And we all look into ourselves and say, and by the way, he threatens nuclear war at the same time. And we say, we don't want a nuclear war with Russia. You can have all of the Warsaw Pact countries, the Soviet countries. Let's just draw the line. No nuclear war. And then he sits on top of this empire, and we have to deal with him as a mean adversary. That's his evil view of the world. And that's what he's trying to achieve, is he wants to basically sit on top of an empire and have us not like him, not respect him, but fear him.
Could China be the key to resolving all of this?
No, China will be the key to prolonging this. So, we've cut off the Russian central bank. Every business is now curtailing their activities in Russia. SWIFT is banned. Oligarchs will have their assets frozen, and they're going to need a lender of last resort. And you can be absolutely 100% guaranteed that the amoral, immoral Chinese will be, and they're not going to do it for free. They're going to be smiling and rubbing their hands together and say, yeah, we can lend you a bit of money, but the Chinese will be there to bail the Russians out. And from our perspective, I mean, so I've told you what Putin's best scenario is. Our best scenario is to squeeze and starve the war machine in Russia so they just don't have the money to do it. That's how we won the Cold War. if we cut them off completely and absolutely, and that requires the Germans tightening their belt and finding other sources of energy so that they just don't have the money, then he has to grind to a halt.
It all boils down to money. Sad but true. Bill Browder, fascinating
Pleasure.
talking to you and listening to you. Thank you very much indeed for your perspective on everything.
Thank you, and
the
stay
insight.
safe as well.
Yeah.